Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm Elizabeth Sackler, and we have reflections on 10 years of the Barred Prison Initiative, which is our second program in our three-part series this fall of States of Denial, the Illegal Incarceration of Women, Children, and People of Color. And if you are on Twitter and feel like tweeting, we are States of Denial, we're hashtag States of Denial BKM. And last Sunday, we had a program touching humanity, creativity, and transformation with Wally Lamb and two women who had participated with me in a workshop when they were incarcerated up at York Penitentiary in Niantic and are now out. And that program can be seen if you'd like to. It's quite a wonderful program at www.brooklynmuseum.org/EASCFA/video. So I think that's all the technological information that you need to get you going. And for those who were here, if there are any of you who were, we were all in unanimous agreement. In fact, one of the women said it should be a law that education, art, writing, and dance and all kinds of learning and creative outlets are really essential, and they're essential for all people, as we know, under any circumstances, and they're vitally essential for incarcerated people. It keeps the brain healthy and alive, it feeds the human spirit and soul, and it certainly nurtures and heals and supports visions and goals of life after incarceration. Vitally important. When I learned about Max Kenner's work and the success with the Barred Prison Initiative, I felt it was essential to our programming for States of Denial to have Max here and have alums from BRI with us this evening. And it is a generous grant from the Novo Foundation that in fact is making States of Denial, the illegal incarceration of women, children, and people of color possible this year and next spring as well. And I'd like to make a shout out also to Art in America, for those of you who may or may not know that online they included this program on their online, the agenda this week in New York. And I think that speaks to the import, it speaks to people's caring and the visibility that this program has. And we do tape them, and they are online. So if there are friends or family or people, colleagues, that you wish had been here who are not, they will be able to go online next week and see the program. So for over a decade, the Barred Prison Initiative has provided rigorous college education to incarcerated New Yorkers. The program, which is highly acclaimed and widely emulated, which I say in quotes, according to the New York Times, is a national leader in rethinking American crises of justice and education. BPI programs in New York culminate in associate's and bachelor's degrees from Bard College, and its alumni are enrolled in graduate schools and work in the human services, with almost never returning to prison. Across the country, BPI is at the forefront of efforts to restore the place of education within American prison systems and to compel colleges to reimagine college access. And I think Max will probably talk about the fact that some of these programs and the fundings for them are being rolled back. And this is a fight that we all have to participate in and do what we can to make sure that all programs and education are available behind bars to incarcerated people. I would like to tell you about our panelists. The way the program is going to run this evening is I will introduce Max after I've read about the panelists. He will speak to you. We're going to see a short film, and then the panelists will take their seats, and then we will have indeed a Q&A afterwards. So our panelists include Erica Mateo, who is the Director of Community-Based Initiatives at the Brownsville Community Justice Center, a demonstration project of the Center for Court Innovation. She is in charge of overseeing the launch and development of the Belmont Revitalization Project, the Brownsville Stronger Together campaign, all interest-based and employment readiness programming for at-risk youths, 16 to 24 years old. Prior to assuming this role, Erica launched the Brownsville Anti-Violence Project and an intensive case management program for court-involved youth for the center. Erica has also worked with Community Solutions in Brownsville to develop a mentor program for court-involved youth in the Bronx with the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center to serve families dealing with the sexual assault of a minor, and in New Orleans to find ways to rebuild community through the tools of ethnography, narrative, and oral history. I know at least one woman in this auditorium to whom that would be very interesting in addition to Erica, so I suspect you might have somebody coming up and speaking with you afterwards. Erica works with the Bard Prison Initiative to advocate for college in prisons, as we must all. Joseph Williams is here with us, and he is 36-year-old husband, father, son, and brother from the Brownsville, East New York section of Brooklyn. He became alumnus of Bard College after graduating from BPI in 2013. Joe spent over a decade in prison. He was released in 2013, and in less than 2 years, he graduated with his master's degree from Columbia University's School of Social Work. Appeared in the November 2014 issue of the Smithsonian Magazine, which featured a feature about Max. Kenner got married and became a full-time social worker in the civil justice practice at Brooklyn Defender Services. So this tells us all something about what we need to work for. And Jewel Hall is here. He grew up also in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and I quote from him, "My immature decisions caused me to serve 22 years incarcerated. It had become clear to me that a way of thinking landed me in prison, and that only learning a new way of thinking would assist me in my release. Fortunately, my education with BPI taught me ways of thinking, which helped me to navigate the challenges of being incarcerated and now those of being free." Those are wonderful words, and I thank you, Jewel. Founder and Executive Director of BPI and our moderator for today's panel is Max Kenner. And Max conceived of and created the Bard Prison Initiative. I love this. I love the history, and I love how this happened. As a student volunteer organization when he was an undergraduate at Bard College in 1999. He has overseen the growth of the program into a credit-bearing and subsequently degree-granting program in 2001. He has led the expansion of BPI from a pilot program with 15 students to a nationally recognized education initiative enrolling nearly 300 students within 6 campuses in correctional facilities throughout New York State. Max Kenner is a leading advocate for the national restoration of college and prison. He is a co-founder of the Consortium for the Liberal Arts in Prison, which supports other colleges and universities in establishing and maintaining ambitious college and prison projects. Wesleyan University, which I know also does courses up at York Penitentiary, which is where I was doing my workshop with the women of York. But Wesleyan University, Grinnell, Goucher colleges in Connecticut, Iowa, and Maryland, respectively, are the first partners in the national project. So Max was a 2013 and 14 fellow in residence at the Charles Warren Center for Studies in American History at Harvard University, and in 2014 he was appointed to serve on Governor Cuomo's New York State Council on Community Reentry and Reintegration, Reentry Subcommittee. In October of 2014, Kenner received the Smithsonian American Ingenuity Award in Education. So please join me in welcoming Max Kenner and he will speak to us, and then the program will continue. Max, would you please join me on stage? This has been very important work. Welcome. You are very welcome. Thank you for being here.
Sure. So thank you, Elizabeth. It's great to be back in Brooklyn, and obviously a privilege to be speaking at an institution as important as this one. I know that this is an unusually sophisticated and informed audience, so rather than tell you again, which I'm sure you've heard many times by now, what mass incarceration is, or tell you that, you know, we have a problem, I just wanted to sort of project from there, making some assumptions on what people already know, project from the recognition of the problem, and think for a few minutes about where we will leave ourselves once we've addressed it, which I have some optimism to think that we are doing and we will do. And the reason this is so important to me, I guess it's a couple things. One, first of all, what's so fantastic about our work is that in some ways it's very straightforward. In other ways, we accomplish things which seem impossible when you look at them the traditional or the conventional way, okay? So with that in mind, just stepping way back for a second and thinking where we'll be once we've addressed, not to say solved, but addressed the underlying problem of mass incarceration. And if you think, you know, if we were in 1858, right, it would be impossible to believe that within 5.5 years that slavery would be abolished, right? That was impossible, and it was a miracle that it happened. But even the most, I think, none of the most optimistic or none of the most cynical Americans at that time could imagine at the moment of abolition and through the radical revolution that was Reconstruction, that within 25 years, labor conditions in the South would be really not all that much better than they were in the 1850s, right? And if we think about the New Deal, which did so much, through so much effort, and so much struggle, and so much suffering, to create the American middle class, and really create a generation or two of unprecedented income equality in the United States. No one at that time recognized that we were also building in a generation of segregation, which led to the problems that we have now, right? Segregation and a system that explicitly, or whether it was explicit or not, I guess is a question, but that truly and essentially barred African Americans from the methods of upward mobility and the middle-class life that it created for so many millions of people, right? And then if you think of the civil rights revolution, for all its accomplishments and all the courage of the people who partook in it, it's absolutely devastating to think that a generation and a half later, there are more African American men now living in custody or in chains than there were at the time of the abolition of slavery. So every moment we've addressed problems and seemingly accomplished the most, a generation or so later, we found ourselves with so many of the same fundamental problems rearing their heads. And so I just want to suggest, as we begin to talk about the work of BPI, that we shouldn't be overly excited about tinkering with sentencing reform or parole or reentry or all the things, or drug laws, all the things that we think might make up the problem of mass incarceration may not. And we can't go about addressing it in a way which will leave us a generation from now, or leave our children a generation from now, with so much of the same problems, okay? So small policy stuff around the edges isn't gonna work. You know, if the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments didn't work the way they needed to, That's what we're talking about now certainly won't. So I just ask that we would keep that in mind. We've been at this work for about 15 years. As Elizabeth said, I started the program as an undergraduate, partly with I had a real disenchantment of the political mood at the time. It was the late 1990s. It was the period of the end of crime and the end of homelessness here in New York City, supposedly. It was the time of the NASDAQ stock market, and everybody was convinced they were going to be rich for some, because they had a bad idea about something. And there was an incredible self-satisfaction, I think, certainly among liberal elites around the country and certainly here in New York City. Even among progressives and the left wing, campus politics at the time, people were going to be critical about things that were happening. There was the anti-sweatshop movement, for example, which had plenty of virtues. But every time we as Americans seemed to be critical, we were projecting outward, right? And never wondering what we could do better ourselves. And it was incredible to me that it coincided with this set of problems that I would argue you cannot parse out from one another, which is it had already become completely obvious, if you were paying attention, what a catastrophe, what we now call, it wasn't called mass incarceration then, but what we now call mass incarceration had become. And we clearly set up this system, right, where we had, for some time now, started locking up more and more people for longer and longer periods of time, very often for smaller and smaller infractions of the law. And the logic of how we think about criminal punishment does something really wild, is as we made prisons the most important institution in American domestic life, as we made prisons the kinds of institutions that we invested the most in, more than schools or healthcare or what have you, we also, it makes no sense, we made them worse, right? You'd think as they became more central to our lives, even that seems like a terrible decision, you might, treat them like they were important. But in fact, the opposite happened. So prisons grew and grew and grew, and then in 1994, 1995, with the Clinton crime bill, the thing that was most proven over and over again to be most effective at any positive thing prisons might do, reduce recidivism, the rate at which people leave and then potentially come back to prison, reduce violence within an institution, help people within a prison restore relationships with their families, on and on, was college education. And that was eliminated overnight in 1995, okay? And so when you put all that together, it was so irrational, and you would try to make sense of it. And the reason it was eliminated was because of a sort of emotional bitterness that, that coincided with the rise in the cost of college. And people would say, well, if it's hard for me to send my children to college, how can these people, go for free? But the argument essentially was and remains a lie, because politically the same people who made that argument were also cutting not only higher education, but K through 12 in budget after budget at the local, state, and federal levels, right? So what you had was a generation where there was unbelievable cynicism about ourselves as Americans, about young people, and hostility that suggested we needed not to invest in one another, but protect ourselves from one another and from our neighbors. And the divestment in education was the same thing as the emergence of mass incarceration, right? Mass incarceration became, we used to talk about social programs as the social so-called safety net, right? And over the course of the 1980s and 90s, we created a system where we dissolved so many of those traditional programs and only created a system where when we failed most, a prison system caught our worst failures. So, if you insist on thinking of these things, the relationship between education and incarceration together, you start realizing how unimaginative we've been in education and how much more we can do, particularly leaders in higher education, in finding all kinds of different students in different places. You know, what we do in the prisons, we're in New York, we're in 6 different prisons, as Elizabeth alluded to, we're in 10 different states. And the fundamental deal that we offer incarcerated people is very simple. We provide an elite and rigorous college education based on one principle, and that is that everyone there is held to the exact same level of standards, expectation, and rigor as students on campus. And BARD is, it's a school, we think highly of ourselves, and it's hard to get into, and students come from fancy high schools from LA and Chicago and China and Europe and all over the country. And this is something that completely defies not only people's expectations and not only people's prejudice and bigotry, but everything that social science, at least in education, says is possible, right? And you keep hearing, and this goes to where, I started in wanting to think about, reconsider what we think is possible and reconsider how we think about social programs. Because, all the social science that you'll read in the New York Times and newspaper and hear about in the media will say how these problems are hopeless and convey what a burden people coming home from prison are on their communities. And I think in the film that we'll watch in a moment and the conversation we'll have with the alum who are here tonight, I think we'll say it'll become obvious that we can do so much better. And I think when you reconsider just how well and how much better we can do, I would ask that you think of all the ways we can do this, because we can do more to rattle the way we do college access, the way we do college admission in all kinds of different ways, right? If the people who are certain to be least successful can thrive in the ways that our alumni do, as Elizabeth said, going to graduate schools like Yale and Columbia and NYU and leading social organizations in New York City, then all kinds of people can. And we can do this for military veterans, and we can do this for members of labor unions, and we can make sure that the next generation of educated Americans are people who most want to be there and who make the most of an opportunity to have an education, not members of a social club whose parents and grandparents went to an institution, so they should too, right? We were with Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, a number of months ago, and in talking about our work, he said something that always sticks with me and I think is very beautiful. He said that the church classically believes that God continues his creation through education. And that really struck me. It struck me because, right, our students who are thriving in the ways that they are precisely the same people that the last generation of social scientists referred to as super predators or hopeless, or people in Congress would say explicitly that this was a generation that we should throw away, right? So that evolution spoke to me. But also as decision makers, if people can evolve in that way, so can institutions. And I think we should all suggest that how we do justice, but also how we do education and healthcare, and all our public institutions can and have to evolve to treat people with a different level of dignity and optimism for the future. So I'll leave it at that, and we should watch this film.
Prisons are incredibly complex places, and we have lived through a generation in time in which they've become among the most important of our public institutions. What's going on in them? Who's in them? What's happening in them? What's happening to people who work in them? What do those institutions say about us?
In our field, there's very often a just and understandable preoccupation with public investment. Over the course of my lifetime, we've incarcerated more and more people for longer and longer periods of time, so often for smaller and smaller infractions of the law. And as we have done that, we have made those institutions less hopeful and said to the people within them that your fate and your future are of no concern and no connection to us.
College programs were once common in prisons. That changed in the 1990s when felons became ineligible for financial aid known as Pell Grants.
Even in 1994, when the omnibus crime bill took Pell Grant eligibility away from prisoners, we knew that the best strategy available to make sure people don't come back to prison is education, particularly college education.
Possible that he's taken on too much as far as... I didn't even know Bard was here. But once I got here and they told me Bard was here, and I realized that that was something I needed, you know, I tried out for it. I mean, society's given up on me. All they want is to keep me locked up and never give me a chance to go home. And that's not what Bard believes.
I think the liberal arts are actually, the perfect place to start. To paraphrase W.B. Du Bois, the goal of education is not to turn a man into a bricklayer, it's actually to turn the bricklayer into a full man. And so it's a full education. It's an education that actually exposes you to a whole world of ideas. I think we would be making a dreadful mistake if we thought that people who are incarcerated only needed vocational training.
We have something that we can offer which will make a huge difference to the lives of these prisoners, to the prisons in which they live, and to their future possibilities. And that goes to the heart of what we know how to do best, which is teach.
Constant begins writing this essay around the time of the final defeat of Napoleon.
If what you want is for people to move to a place of transformation, you can't start by saying, well, here's the strike against you, that we're always going to keep at the back of our minds. The most important thing is that we cultivate an environment where the students can come and be students, where their value is as participants in a class only.
When I'm in a classroom, I'm not affected by my current situation. Throughout the prison system, we're looked at as if we're not even human. When we come to the classroom, we're individual college students as if we are on Bard's campus. And we have to give our all. Yes, it's great.
You have to remember that our students will always, in every walk of life, be held to a higher standard whenever they apply for a job, whenever they apply to transfer to another academic institution.
So it's very hard to get in. They each take this essay test, which is intimidating. I would be terrified. We pick about 60 for personal interviews. 2 of us interview each one of those 60 people, and out of that we make the very difficult decision of which 15 or so to admit.
You have something of a form close to the MX.
BPI is very demanding, and the expectations are extremely high. I mean, I remember my first class. I could not get an A from this woman, and by the end of the class I got an A, and I got an A+ on the last paper and an A in the class. But, I had to really work hard for it.
At this point in my life, how I performed in the program, I thought that was how I would measure myself as a human being. And that brought out a tenacity in me to just go harder, study harder.
In the very first class I taught, one of the students in the class was writing his senior project, or I guess had just finished it, and he brought it in for me to read. And I was blown away. The last senior thesis I had worked with was at Harvard. And here was a guy in BPI writing a senior thesis that was every bit as good as an honors thesis at Harvard. Now, starting where that person had started and ending up with that product was just remarkable.
We say to them from the very first day, we are only as good as you. So for the first time, perhaps, in many of their lives, an institution of some prestige, an institution of some significant cultural capital, has said to them, we see ourselves in you, and we see our future in your future.
Scene 1, setting, a prison door. Music is blaring from a radio. All the characters are in their individual cubes, involved in some activity.
Hey, yo, Ratchet, turn that radio down.
Here comes Mitch with the mail.
Yo, Rara, you know LA lost that game last night. You owe me 4 cartons now.
Playwriting is power. For a person who's basically reduced to a number, you know, you wear a green uniform, you don't have too many outlets where you can express yourself. And playwriting to me became freedom. When you reach a college level, that's when you really start getting knowledge of your surroundings, of yourself. You start questioning politics, other religions, other cultures, other societies. And these are things like you could bring back to the neighborhoods where we're from.
Growing up in Brownsville, I always felt like I would end up in prison because I didn't feel like I had many options. I'm now working as a case manager, working with 16 to 24-year-olds with some criminal justice system involvement within the last 12 months. People don't expect a lot from these kids, and if people actually got to know them, they would prove almost everything wrong. You know, they aren't lazy kids. They want to work. They're eager to work. They have dreams that they want to be accountants and architects, and it brings me a lot of pleasure to see them achieve their goals.
How are you today?
How about you?
Fine, thank you. I first started working with Growing My Seed as a stepping stone towards my establishing a career in environmentalism. We're collecting food scraps for compost, trying to encourage residents to reduce the amount of unnecessary waste that goes into the landfill, particularly organic waste. I volunteer here and other environmental organizations as a way to extend the garden project that I started in Woodburn. I've been inspired to build a community garden to help formerly incarcerated people into the environmental field, training them while they're still incarcerated. The garden project has been going on since 2009, so I'm really proud that the guys continued after I was released. Last night I received an email that I've been accepted into NYU's Master in Urban Planning program, so it was really great news and really excited about that, and I'm looking forward to participating and challenging myself and working towards becoming a professional.
Being good at academic work meant that you could be an academic, and I never really had any model for that, you know? My father didn't go to college, my mother didn't go to college. So the professors really were models for what I could aspire to be. You know, I made my incarceration history a part of my application for grad school, and I tried to frame it that way because I do believe it's true. In ethnography, there's a phrase, you go native. You know, you try to get into the lifestyle of whoever you're studying. I've been there, you know, and my history gives me a unique perspective to hopefully influence policy and move towards more socially just policies. And that's a big part of why I'm drawn to the work I've been doing and the work I want to do.
I think it's important that we ask ourselves what this means. What does it mean when Erica Mateo returns to Brownsville, Brooklyn? What does it mean when Manny Boris is making artwork at the Public Theater? And as our alumni go to graduate schools and move on in business and in not-for-profits and in the arena of public health? What does it mean when we can find so much enthusiasm for ideas and academic accomplishment? Extraordinary talent can be found in the most unconventional places if we as educators treat people with dignity.
I have a question for you. Yes. How would you describe such a society? What I'm saying, like, because it has a caste system, was it...
The importance of BPI to me is that this is a project that actually shows how we can succeed and how we can build success out of the policy failures of mass incarceration that have actually put us in the position we're in today. There's a road out of this, but we actually have to have the courage to take it.
So while there's lots more to be done in New York, nationally, we felt the most impactful thing we could do would be to empower other educational communities to take this on themselves. So we've partnered with Wesleyan University in Connecticut, Grinnell College in Iowa, Goucher College in Maryland, and we want their prison projects to reflect their communities and their values as deeply as we hope we reflect Bart's.
A college education does not get us better treatment in prison, nor does it guarantee release on parole. The work is hard, the hours are long, and and there aren't many immediate rewards. However, I wanted to be a better person. And as I stand here before you today, I believe it has made me a better person. What really motivated me was my kids, because I started wondering, you know, what am I gonna do for them? You know, what kind of example am I gonna be for them? He's been telling me all day, it's like I'm famous, you know? And I mean, that's a feeling that nothing in the world could take away from me, you know? It's a feeling I can't even describe because it makes me feel so good.
The irony is that the best students we have, bar none, are our undergraduates who are in prison. That the men and women who've suffered ostracism and incarceration are the most curious, disciplined, and most original and hardworking students. When we look at those students and experience them in the classroom, the gift is not ours to the prisoners, it's their gift to us.
As I understand it, our correction system culminates with a bus ticket. Here's what you have when you leave the door. Here's a bus ticket, which is frankly a bus ticket to recidivism. It's a bus ticket back, okay? When the system instead culminates in college, that's gonna be your bridge. It changes the meaning of the whole system.
So, you know, one thing that's really exciting about being here tonight in the format of this event is there's no question that even 15 or 16 years ago in establishing the program, we always knew that the real fruit of our work and, you know, everything that's become it's sort of miraculous that it's still in business and doing what it's doing, but the real purpose of it was the assets and the values and the ambition and the talent that we would cultivate that would return to places like Brooklyn. So I'm going to just lead a semi-formal discussion between the four of us. As it happens, I think all three of you guys are from Brooklyn, but that is random. We have students and alumni from Queens
and Brownsville.
I'm speechless. Let's start with Joe. So, Joe, I guess if you would just briefly introduce yourself, but I'd like to start with if you could give us an anecdote about something that surprised you most while you were with us at BPI. But tell us where you're from and give us the short version first.
Short version. I'm from Brownsville. I was raised in East New York. I've been living a life of crime since about 13. I've done time in New Jersey. I've done time in New York. And me being in prison in 2003, my daughter's mother was 3 months pregnant with her. My daughter's sitting right here. She's 12 now. Baby, if you're cold, grab my jacket. I said to myself, I swore I would never be like my father. And here it is, I'm expecting a child, and I'm back in prison, and I know I'm going to be here for double digits. Something has to give. And throughout that time, I was in various institutions, and I landed in Eastern. And when I got there, I found out that they had Bard there. And one of the things that stuck out most to me was kind of in my interview, and it was something that I had ingrained in myself as far as my outlook on myself in the environment I was in. So during the interview, after the essay writing, after the interview with Max and Dan, they said to me that, and there was a question, we don't like to have our students see being embarred as one of the programs in the prison. Why is that? And I thought about it for a minute, and I answered them, I said, a program in prison is something that we have to do. It's something that we are resentful towards. However, looking at this as being college here in prison, it's something that I want to do. It's something that I'm eager to do. And so what I did was, I looked at myself not as a prisoner who was in college, but I saw myself as a college student who was just so happened to be in prison.
So everyone on this stage, right, has a BA from Bard and different routes. Like any liberal arts college, I think, students at Bard have to choose a major and go through a process of doing that. And at Bard, every student is required to write something that's the equivalent of a honors thesis at most other institutions. Jewel is most recently returned to Brooklyn of any of the three of you guys. So just 2 months home?
Yes.
Tell us just for a couple minutes about your time with BPI and your senior project in particular.
Okay, my time with BPI has been very transformative. It provided me with the space to be able to do something constructive with myself, to be able to make amends for the wrongs that I know I have committed. BPI gave me the space that I didn't find in prison to try to transform and change. When I got into BPI, so much work was dumped on me that I was overwhelmed, but it was a beautiful experience because it allowed me to escape prison through my mind and explore different ideas, different places. One class I had in particular that I was very enamored with was German literature. We was reading different works by philosophers as well as literary greats like Günter Grass, Max Weber, Karl Marx, Wolfgang von Goethe, and what happened was a few of my classmates and I noticed that some of the translations were choppy. So we actually had the idea that if Max would provide us with a German language class, that we could get a better understanding from the literature. And you know, Max was worked with us to actually make that happen. So to make a long story short, I can now read, speak, and hear German. And I did my senior project thesis on the influences of Gastarbeiter on German identity from 1954 to 1989. I showed, or I explored and examined the ways in which the migrant workers both renewed German identity after the corruption of the Nazi past, as well as challenged it and invoked a more chauvinistic response after it was quote unquote called the multicultural society. It was 128 pages, one of the most hardest things I've ever done in my life, but it's something that I'm extremely proud of.
Great. Erica, we got a glimpse of you in the film of the Erica of 2 or 3 years ago, but tell us what you're up to now in terms of your career.
Yeah, so I watched that. I was cringing a little bit. I was like, oh, I was so young back then. And I just got like my first real job. But I'm still working with the same organization. So I work for the Center for Court Innovations in Brownsville at the Brownsville Community Justice Center. And there I'm the director of community initiatives. And I have some folks from my team here rooting me on. So at the Justice Center, we work with young people who have come in contact with the criminal justice system. And I have, like these guys, also from Brownsville, I have a strong passion for where I live and feel that I have a close understanding of what some of our young people are going through. So the work that I do now is working with young people who, like I said, have been incarcerated or have touched the criminal justice system in some way, to reconnect them to their communities in ways that are meaningful, that are stabilizing, to think about how we can, in this really tough climate here in Brooklyn, while Brooklyn is changing rapidly in some places, in Brownsville, not so much. It's been hit hard by mass incarceration. When you can pick 3 random alum and we all happen to be from Brownsville, I think it speaks to that. And so we're there trying to change the narrative of a community so that way another generation isn't lost.
So that's great, but I just want to push on one thing, because from what I know about you and hearing from what Jules had to say, you know, what is, in your mind, Erica, what does that have to do with the skills that you've developed and the work that you do now? How does that relate to a liberal education and a diversity of the kinds of things you studied at Bard?
It's not easy. I think people might think that when you're from a community and you go back to work there, that you have some insight into that community. But to go back with a kind of renewed lens, so while at Bard I studied anthropology, I studied 2 years inside, and I finished my degree on campus in upstate New York on Annandale on Hudson. And when I talk about changing the narrative, it comes from this really anthropological place to look at my community in a way that I can impact my community in a different way. How can I make interventions into this narrative through the work that I'm doing, through the social service work that I'm doing? That critical lens, I don't think at the time when the first organization that I worked for, I came asking questions that weren't being asked at the table. I think it was a little bit of not having as much professional etiquette as everyone else, but also not being afraid to ask the questions that needed to be asked, so that way we can look at these issues creatively. And I wouldn't be able to do that, and I wouldn't be able to keep up with such a creative team if I hadn't gone to Bard. That pushed me to think about how I could make those kind of sort of interventions in my own community.
I don't know if anyone really believes that you wouldn't be able to do it, which begs another question, but I will table it for now. Joe, you're also doing direct services work now.
Yes.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about your time in graduate school and how that led to where you're at now?
All right, so in this past May, I graduated from Columbia University School of Social Work with my master's in social work. I actually just hit the 2-year mark, so I've only been home 2 years. I came home with an idea and an agenda of what it is that I wanted to do. I came home with a plan, and that plan entailed me applying, getting out in August 30th of 2013, applying to Columbia for the 16th month program in October, which started in January of 2014, me handling my business academically and every other way to be able to take care of my daughter as well as myself, and me graduating, not barely, but I think I graduated with like a 3.6 GPA. Wow. And immediately going right into work full time as a social worker in the civil justice practice in my first year's internship. So for me, it was fortunate that my work there as an intern, as my first year intern, working with the adolescents, just doing and learning social work hands-on, learning social work academically, and then being challenged by my organization to go into a field where I knew nothing about. The civil justice practice, I work with clients who suffer collateral consequences of coming in contact with the criminal justice system or with the family system. You know, clients have ACS cases. Their children are being taken away. Based on that, they may be losing their apartment. They may lose their benefits. My job is to get them back their benefits, get them back into apartments. And it's not just me, it's with the attorneys that I work with. And just, my passion was always for helping people. And coming home, going through the School of Social Work, coming home with an idea and with an agenda of what it is that I want to do, I was fortunate enough, because of BARD and the relationships that I built there, the social capital that I've gained there, was able to do what it is that I'm doing now.
But I'm going to push back though, because you just did the same thing that Erica did, and so you know, so Jewel can speak German, and that seems to just amaze people. And you, Joe, went to an Ivy League institution and got a graduate degree and did well there, and now have a great job. And Erica is working in management in, you know, one of the most important social service agencies and a community in New York that needs it most. And yet, you know, again, I don't think any of us, and so this is a question for any and all three of you, because you're familiar with it, because it's something that we grapple with as an institution, as teachers, as administrators, and students, when we talk about what we do, and, you know, where is the there, right? And, you know, we know that you had that passion, you know, before you came to the college, right? You just said so, and we know it's true. And we know that, you know, Erica was capable of doing, in so many ways, the kinds of work she was doing now before encountering the college, right? And Jewel was, you know, curious in the ways that he is now. Also, you know, that wasn't something that he learned, you know, on an exam with a bubble test and a #2 pencil, right?
That's right.
So, and you know, more than for students anywhere else, but especially I think for students in prison, there's always this pressure for, I think, you to say and for everyone to believe that somehow you were changed, right, or transformed, or
That's right.
God forbid, you know, reformed by the college, right? And you know, I think sometimes we're skeptical of that. And, you know, I'd love to hear from each or any of you as to whether or why we're skeptical of it, and if that's not true, then, you know, what is the college?
I think you should be skeptical of that. So I've always had a certain tenacity. I'm just I'm a tenacious person, even before I met Bard. And I think I was, and before I met Max.
Not me.
I did push back on Bard when they first came to Bayview, and I was kind of the person in the audience like, is the liberal arts going to get me a job when I get out of jail? Because I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I need some hard skills here. But I was always thinking about, when I looked out my window in my 22-story high-rise in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and I looked out the window and I'm saying, why is my community like this? Why is it why is it that everyone I see we're struggling, or there's so many people dropping out of school, or my family is experiencing this sort of hardship? And I was always thinking about that in a really critical way. But I think what Bart did was give an opportunity to help me to push. There's only so much you can do in a room by yourself and in your own head. So Bart created the space and the opportunity to explore that with other people. Bart also helped to give me the language to talk about the things that I was feeling, I was getting upset about when I looked out the window, and when I was out doing mischief myself. But it gave me the language that I needed to have other people understand what that emotion was. And that still exists, even in my work now, I think. I'm very emotional and passionate about my work, but the reason why I'm promoted or asked to work on projects is because now I have the language to talk about it in a way that makes other people understand what the issues are.
Now, I just want to say that I agree that the language is a great thing that Bard gave us, because definitely the text that we had, I needed a dictionary right next to me to understand my reading. However, I think the most valuable thing that Bard gave us was responsibility. And it was a level of responsibility that nobody in corrections gave us. So I enrolled into BARD. A week before classes start, I was given 10 textbooks and told at least 3 of them had to be read before the first day of class. So I had to take the responsibility to read that. When I said space before, this is what I would like to define as space. It gave me the space to understand if I want to be prepared for that classroom, I need to read this material, so I can't go outside and play basketball. I can't sit in front of a television. I got to explain to my family to a degree, I can't call you, I love you and understand I'm doing something constructive, but I need to get this reading done. So that is just one example of what BPI did, aside from language, that I think helped us to take on, I know for me, to take on other challenges, because once I started reading textbooks in 3 nights that some people haven't read in a lifetime, I felt I could do anything. So when other challenges was presented to me, like, okay, if you want that German class, you need to find who else is going to attend and explain to them the process that it's going to be a 2-year class. So I took that responsibility and walked around and asked my student body, yo, I need you to take this class with me. Come on, we got to get German in here. You know, and we did it for Spanish, did it for Chinese. Well, another thing, you and I used to sit down and study and read each other's papers. Not necessarily because, of course, I felt you were capable and you felt I was capable, but you knew Ellen Lagerman was going to really be hard on you, so you needed somebody so you went to somebody else. You didn't just rely on yourself. Right. It provided you with the space to understand that I need to rely on others as well. So by BPI providing us with this space of an education, so many other values of language, of responsibility, of having faith in others just sprung out of it. So
before you start pushing, let me go. You're getting ready to push, so let me go. All right. So one of the main things that I knew why I left downstate straight to Clinton. I was in Clinton for a few years. I was good in Clinton. I wanted to transfer out because I knew in me planning for my out, although I'm like 2-3 years in, I'm planning for that out date. And I knew for me to get the most out of this time, I had to come home with a college education. I had to come home with more than an associate's because being an ex-felon, being from the neighborhood that I'm from, Brownsville, East New York, I always got to put East New York in that because, you know, it is what it is. Looking the way I look as a young black man from these places, I knew I needed to come home with something that can at least get me to the table to have a discussion. Without an education, without a college degree, 9 times out of 10, I'm not getting to that table. Now, granted, I knew already that you put me at that table, you open that door, give me the opportunity to run my mouth, I'm gonna talk myself into a job. That was a gift of gab that I was just born with. But what BARD did was, BARD honed all those skills that I already had. I used to write rhymes. What BARD did was allow me the space, not just about the language, because Drew could tell you what Velting Shong means. I can't. I don't know.
But you know how to say it.
Yeah. But what it gave me was the opportunity to take what went on up here, put it down here in such an articulate manner that someone reading it would not know anything about my past. Max mentioned, or he asked about the senior project. My senior project was on hip hop and the gangster culture. It was 111 pages and I got an A- on it. And my thesis was, hip hop became the top selling genre in 1998, not because of a relaxation of culture or more of acceptance of black music. It wasn't because of capitalism and anything of that nature. I argued that hip hop became the top selling genre in 1998, outselling country western, was because in the mid 90s, rappers subconsciously began changing their image, their moniker, and the style of their lyrics to mirror the American gangster. And if you go back into the mid-90s when Biggie Smalls started calling himself Frank White, when you had Nas Escobar calling himself Sosa and so on and so forth, Wu-Tang calling himself the Wu Gambinos, this was an adoption or technologies of the self, the way Michel Foucault would frame it. This was a changing of themselves to mirror the culture that was there and exploit America's obsession with the gangster. I couldn't do that prior to going to Bard. I could tell you about it, but to articulately write that, I couldn't do that before.
But Joe, but why do you think it is that, I mean, I certainly feel it, you know, when we are fundraising or speaking publicly or in the media or what have you, that there's so often desire to talk about our students as transformed, right, or changed, right? And what makes you uncomfortable with that?
I think the onus goes to you guys and not us.
Yeah, because hold up, aren't you presupposing that he's uncomfortable with being known as transformed?
Because I'm not Joe from...
Yeah, you're happy to admit that.
Look at me.
You're doing okay.
I'm grateful for Bard.
Okay.
Yes, and same with me. I'm transformed. I'm so happy with this new person that I am. I look at myself in the mirror and I love myself. There was a time in prison that I was afraid to look in the mirror because I know of my past.
Erica, you want to take that?
I think if there is some feeling of not being comfortable with that, I think that Bard or we're transformed people, it kind of speaks to what you were talking about earlier, and the reason why I do my work is that before being in the classroom, that the sorts of people that end up in prison either don't have the capacity or aren't thinking about things in a critical way. And like I said earlier, I think that I've always kind of been in tune with the world around me. Am I a different person? I don't think I'm a different person. I think that I'm a more aware person. I think when you talk about responsibility, I actually think about social responsibility. I think when you become more aware of what's around you, you become more empathetic. So I think I don't make the same decisions, but I think I'm the same person.
We're going to turn it over to the audience in just a minute, but there's one thing you said, Jewel, and I'd just like to pose the question to the whole group that really struck me, and Erica just alluded to it, was this question of responsibility. And it was just interesting to me thinking that, you said that when you became a college student, you took on responsibility and were expected to take responsibility in a different way. And to me, that was striking because, of course, when we think about all the policy decisions that make up something like what's become mass incarceration, the explanation or the justification for it came from people who were advocating what they called personal responsibility. So how is that possible? Advocates of personal responsibility, it seems like you're saying, ended up creating institutions which created the opposite, right? So can we just, how did that work while each of you were upstate or in other institutions, in schools growing up or what have you? What were the kinds of responsibilities that were different in the college as opposed to, Joe, you were talking about other programs in prison or anywhere else?
I don't know if that really, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't know if that, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't know if that, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't know if that, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't know if that, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't know if that, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't know if that, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't know if that, by making that comparison of bar classrooms and other prisons is actually just a fair, doesn't characterize BARD in a really fair way. I don't Yeah, so I would not answer that piece of the question because I think barred as, yeah.
Well, I could say what I meant. When I was in prison, I was always watched. I wasn't given the responsibility to do the right thing. When I was when I was issued a job, I wasn't asked if I wanted the job. When I was issued a job, I was watched and they came behind me to check that job to make sure it was done. I wasn't responsible. They didn't give me the responsibility to do it and do it the right way. There was always the idea that I was going to do something irresponsible. So I had to be watched at every moment. I couldn't be allowed to hold. One time in BPI, I actually worked on a computer where the officers had said, "Oh, you're going to get on the internet." Mind you, we don't have no outside internet access, but we can't allow you to get on that because you would do X, Y, and cause World War III or whatever. Now, BPI came to me and said, "Okay, we're going to buy 3 computers, and you guys got to make sure 35 students use it." And what 35 students did? Yo, you ready? You go now, and I'll go after you. And so this is what I mean about, it's funny how you provided us with these things. I don't want to call them materialistic. I think it was the idea that in order for this to work, you have to be responsible and make sure everybody get their work done. And from providing us with that responsibility, it allowed me to say, okay, I could do this, without a doubt. So,
I don't like to take the onus away from myself. My mother was a single parent, right? She had me young. She set a crazy example for me. She lauded education. I chose to start hustling because it was things that I wanted that I didn't have. I made the decision to live a life of crime. So I get what you're saying, where those who speak the rhetoric of personal responsibility that created this system of mass incarceration, they do put the onus on the individual. Had I never pitched a drug, had I never picked up a gun, had I never did any type of crime and made better decisions for myself, I would 9 times out of 10 have achieved what I've done in 2 years home, plus much more in the time that I spent incarcerated. However, when we look at systemic oppression, when we look at the lack of social capital, when we look at people inheriting apartments, whereas the wealthy inherit houses and land and so on and so forth, like, the system was definitely stacked against me that helped that prod and that pushing that you're talking about. It was a systemic push that did push me towards being one of the statistics of mass incarceration. So now, based on a choice that I made, due to circumstances that beyond my control, now I'm in prison. Now I have the opportunity to apply to BARD, because there were many people who I knew from those videos that I were with, that we were with, who didn't choose to apply themselves wholeheartedly. There were people who weren't in those videos that we know, who were in the yard playing ball, who were out on the phone watching the games or doing whatever, who didn't choose or make the decision to apply to BARD, let alone get in and apply themselves. So personal responsibility plays out in every spectrum of an individual's life, of their life. And what I think is my social obligation to the young, to the clients that I come in contact with, I want to help, and I mentioned social capital, you know, this Pierre Bourdieu's, this idea of social capital. Me knowing you has created my spider web. When a spider shoot a web from here to there, he or she can only travel back and forth. When that intricate web is formed, that spider could travel in any direction. So I made the choice to utilize BARD as a means of growing my social capital, growing my spider web, and being able to be that same lifeline, so to speak, to the clients that I come in contact with, to the young that I come in contact with.
Great.
That's my responsibility.
Do we have questions from the audience?
Do you feel like being in a sex-segregated environment was like empowering in the classroom, or would you rather have been, with women or with men?
So the question, should I repeat the question for posterity, is to the alumni about their opinions of whether or what the impact was in living or going to school in a single gender, single sex environment. Is it a pointed question towards the men or the women on the stage? Or, okay. We can do a lightning round here.
I think it's tough, like when you say rather, I think no, I'd rather have started my college career at BARD on Annandale. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And then, not to discredit my classroom experience inside, I was in a classroom with a group of women who were super thoughtful and ambitious, and BARD tricked me into believing that every college student read everything they were assigned. And it was crazy. And when I got to BARD Annandale campus, I realized students actually didn't work that hard. I'm appreciative of my inside experience, because I was a part of the first class in Bayview, and the women, when I got to Bayview from upstate in Albion, there were women already working on bringing college to the prison, and they first met Max, and then brought me along, was like, Erica, you're sassy and tenacious, and you're gonna speak your mind, so you should come in on this. But that experience with those women were invaluable. But I'd rather have. You know what you said, Erica, it resonates with something I was going to comment on. I was worried we were running out of time when Joe was talking before in his last answer. And, you were talking about how one perceives the fairness or the justice of, again, what we now call mass incarceration. And, there's something counterintuitive, I think, about that's at the heart of the success of the college, is that, no one can really, guilty or innocent, fair or unfair, no one can really accomplish what our students have to accomplish, understanding themselves as victims, right? It's too much work to take on, right? And Erica's response to this question reminded me of that, which is, the central sort of covenant that I think our students have to make is a willingness to, in the most challenging and in some ways humiliating circumstances, accept that this period of time is as meaningful and as precious as any other moment in their lives or anybody's lives. And the prison itself, in many ways, is, I think, its power is rooted in a cynicism which says that we have the power, the authority to convince people that moments of their lives, which are, in everyone's case, of course, temporary and limited, doesn't matter, are irrelevant. And so, whether people feel that the group of students they're with is ideal or not, the essence of the value of the college, I think, is convincing people to focus not on what's scarce, but on what can be most fulfilling and rewarding in a given scenario.
So, to answer your question, I'm glad there weren't any women, because I would have been distracted like crazy, and so I was able to just focus on work and get it done.
But if I may real quick as well, the scarcity of resources not necessarily of being away from different types of genders. The scarcity of resources actually allowed many of us to work hard and better with what we had. So being segregated, being in prison, we had a firm understanding that, listen, there's not enough books, there's not enough this, we have to share. So I mean, in that sense, we really was aware of what we was without, and it caused us to work a little bit more harder or in a unified manner in order to achieve the responsibilities and the assignments that were placed on us.
To quickly just piggyback on that really quickly, I have this sort of fascination with space and how to transform spaces. And in the prison, the bathroom became the study hall,
That's right.
and the staircases became your group rooms.
That's right.
And so, just speaking to the lack of resources and how you have to be creative, students began to also transform some of the spaces in the prison by doing things differently in them.
That's right.
That's great. Francie.
Hey, to follow up on that, Erica, what you just said, I'm very interested in the nitty-gritty of getting this really high-level collegiate work done in a prison environment. How did you do this, ton of very challenging work, given that did you all have jobs that you had to do as well?
Yes.
You were in cell blocks that presumably were very noisy and chaotic. How were you able to block out the time and then to complete these extraordinarily difficult senior projects?
Wait, yeah, Joe, that's you.
So, coffee at 3 in the morning, when everybody go to sleep. It gets super quiet. You stay up, keep your light on, work through the night. Some jobs afforded us the opportunity to, once the work is done, I can seclude myself in an area where I've been here and been doing this for so long. The officers have a modicum of trust, where it's like, he's working, he's in barred, he's one of the responsible prisoners, and I'm just in a zone, and I'm reading or I'm writing. Another thing I saw guys do, he was like one of the king of it. You always see him with orange earplugs. No matter where he was throughout the he had on orange earplugs. And he's like zoning and tuning everything and everybody out and focusing on Weltanschauung and everything else.
Jewel, Erica, you want to jump in here?
So I made some of the closest friends that I've ever had in prison, and we sit around each other a lot, and we were probably the people making noise, talking about some texts that we read really loudly and arguing about it and reading each other's papers. So during rec, bringing out our papers instead of, doing whatever else we could be doing, we were studying and debating and using every opportunity to explore these new ideas. And I would say people. I always talk about every time I read a new text, I felt like I was meeting someone new. So.
Yeah, I just want to say also that we developed identity with BPI to a degree where some of the people around us would help us. So guys would be like, yo, be quiet. They're over there studying. So people actually were supportive in many ways. I could go to the rec area and sit down at a table and open a book, and guys would actually let me have that table to myself and not disturb me because I had developed an identity in prison for being part of BPI, and guys kind of really respect that. So it was helpful.
I think that's right. Are there other questions in the back?
I was just curious what sort of support systems BARD provides once you get out and sort of make the transition as a prisoner and a college graduate to society at large.
Who is that a question for?
For you and then
Sure.
Well, why don't we start with, let's do it quick, because I think we should all say a word or two. It's certainly something I would just preface by saying it's something we have taken more and more on as, you know, more and more of our people are coming home. You know, at first it wasn't, you know, the volume was much smaller. So, but we've known Jewel for a long time, and he's just home a couple months, so what's that like?
Well, we have a reentry specialist, Mr. Jed Tucker. I'm on the phone with him regularly. He texts me. He has helped me immensely. I am so grateful that he has been part of this transition because it's pretty scary, you know, after doing so much time in prison. And one of the things that while he provides so many resources, whether it's interviewing, putting together resumes, he's linking us with conferences and stuff. One of the most valuable resources he helped me to understand is each other. So he has gotten me in contact with men who have been home before me that went through the same things that I'm about to go through to tell me, yo, listen, this is how you do that. So it has been extremely helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have a good story because I came home probably before these guys, which is about 6 years ago when we didn't have a reentry specialist.
It's true.
But I had Max. I had Max on campus.
You made up for it. You know, I would just say a couple things. First of all, you know, we are relatively new to the so-called reentry business, and for many years we were allergic to being involved at all. And the reason for that wasn't because of a disregard for the fortunes of our people, you know, after release, but that in doing the work, right, you know, one of the things that is most mind-boggling to me about the experience of being in prison as I understand it, you know, as observing it, is how common it is for people to project onto you what you need or should have or should do. And you are just an object to you know, a vessel for other people's ideas about something, themselves, religion, who knows what, right? And so in building the college, there was always so much pressure for us to do something other than what we were qualified or knew how to do. Some people thought it would be religion, or other people, you know, anti-violence or rehabilitation of some kind, or drug treatment, or everybody had a bad idea of what was right for someone they didn't know to take on, right? It's incredible. So we were always pushing back. It should be vocational training. Why? Even Erica. You should do vocational training, forget a liberal education, right? So we always kept that at bay. And then the problem we had when people started coming home at a real clip was that it was really tragic. You know, even though there are more resources in New York City for people returning home from prison than anywhere, I think, many of those institutions had very little capacity to take advantage of the training and education and expertise that our alumni developed in prison, right? So, you know, I developed a real, I have to say, disappointment with the social service establishment in New York City, which I think too often has terribly low expectations for the people they ostensibly serve, and who, you know, very often, you know, you hand a guy or a girl a broom and find them a temporary minimum wage job, and, you know, the job is done. And that's just not the hopes that we have, you know, for our students and our alumni. So what we do, we broker relationships between our alum and other institutions. So we have one person serving 250 or 300 alum or whatever it is, but we make sure no one's homeless, and we make sure everyone are in positions where their highest aspirations are taken seriously. We should probably do one more question, and yeah. Oh, maybe two more.
These are amazing, very inspiring stories, and So I'm really glad that this program exists, so thank you all for coming. But I apologize in advance for my cynicism here, but it seems to me that the number of people that can actually apply and get selected and get through this program successfully might be a really small number compared to the overall number of people in mass incarceration. So I wonder, how much effect this could actually have on the problems of mass incarceration. And I wonder if you agree with that or not. That's cynicism, and if so, how can you evolve, or how can this interact with other programs to solve problems of mass incarceration?
This is a great last question.
That was a great question. Definitely.
You're up?
Nah.
I'm going to have the last word, so you go first. Okay, we'll do one more question.
Wow. I really don't want to answer that one first. Kenneth, now, one thing I think of are resources. BARD is funded through private donors. So because 100 plus people may apply, only 60 get called to an interview, only 15 per year are chosen in each facility throughout that selection process. The resources are there for those 15, so to speak. I think once others begin realizing their social obligation, and I think of the Netherlands, right? And I think of the criminal justice system there. And the way the criminal justice system there in the Netherlands works is their whole system is geared towards helping the individual who was convicted of a crime be reintegrated into their society. This system has this punitive perspective. And as long as that punitive perspective exists and persists, I don't think that we'll see substantive changes in a short period of time. Now, that's not to say that those of us who are being affected and making these minute changes, because you drop in a pebble, that ripple has long-lasting effects, although it's a pebble, but we're talking of a longer period of time. So I don't know if I really touched on.
But let me just real quick, I just want to say real quick, it's amazing how those 15 people who get in BARD influence a population of 1,000 people through all types of side programs. Could you help me write this letter to my lawyer?
Erica and Joe are doing now.
Yeah, or how they come home and start doing things to help other people. So that ripple effect has definite, even though it's just 15 people, I could tell you in the facility that I was in, those 15 people, BPI as a student body influenced every program that was in jail, whether it was helping people get GEDs, all types of stuff.
Yeah, ripple effects within the institution and people as parents and the work they do at home. But even I want to push back in a more fundamental way. And I'd preface it by saying, we don't know. When we launched this program, there was not a single expert in the United States that said this would work, right? Mm-hmm. And we've taken it from a program to 15 students to a program of 300 students that enrolled many hundreds more and has alumni, and we have sister programs in states across the country. So we have no idea where the threshold is. And I'd suggest that the country doesn't have the courage to find out, doesn't have the will to find out, right? But what we do, Joe mentioned resources and money, right? And we do run on a catastrophic financial model. We're the only country in the United States where there's no endowment, no government money, and not a student pays tuition. And what that ultimately means is that we are going to fail, right? We are going to close at some point where there's no way we can continue doing this without some kind of miraculous intervention. So as much as the experience and the fulfillment that our students have and the impact that they have on other people's lives really matters, I think equally important is the example that we set in education and justice and for all other institutions in American life, right? Because at its core, BPI is just an experiment to see what happens when you provide the resources that are typically assumed that should only be dedicated to the children of the rich and the children of the lucky and the entitled, to the ones that all the experts will say aren't interested or aren't capable, right?
So I guess what I'm wondering, and I guess I could direct this to you, Max, more specifically, is how could something like this, I think the successes and progress and purpose of BPI, spread with so much pushback from culture and from policy and from, like, how do we get the word out? Because I would love to help. I just don't exactly know how. Does that make sense? So I guess thinking about your brainstorming that you've done outside of things like this, outside of other events and programs.
Sure. So, first of all, I think I want to say, a year and a half ago now, Andrew Cuomo, the governor, announced that he was going to take this on and support the expansion of programs like this, and got beat in the legislature. And everybody remembers it and treats it like a terrible failure, terrible embarrassment. And for those of us, Elizabeth, I know you know Vivian, for Vivian and for me and for Glenn Martin, the people who've really been working on this for a long time, it was really amazing because everyone felt the visceral reaction that came from people who think what we do is wrong, and they are out there. But when there was public polling, the majority of the New Yorkers wanted the proposal to succeed. So I think the lesson we take is that we have to have the courage and the willingness to know that when we're inclined to be generous and be hopeful and optimistic for the future and have concern for others, that we shouldn't cower in the face of cynicism. And I think that's what most often we do, and it's something that, it's a lesson that we learn from our students and the experience of BPI that applies in all walks of life.
Max, is there a way that people can make donations to your
There are many ways that people can make donations.
Well, please, we take
there's
this
a website
for a commercial break.
Sure. So we do. Just lastly, it is absolutely incredible, Elizabeth. We have no regular form of income. We exist only because of the generosity of individuals, rich and otherwise. And the fact that we continue to be able to do what we do based on the contributions of people who, frankly, have no direct interest in our work or direct relationship with our students is really an act of such, generosity, and it's so amazing that we're still here. And we only exist because people support us. And so you can make a contribution to BPI on our website, bpi.bar.edu, or there are lots of ways of finding us, or we even, have a mailbox. So however you can do it, and every gift really makes a difference. So thanks for that opportunity.
Well, you're so welcome. I want to thank you all very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We're done. We're done.
And absolutely, please just wait a minute. I just want to say that I think your achievements, all of you, and Max included, are extraordinary. And I think that you have shown what the systemic problem is, which is a fundamental disrespect for human beings. And of course, we also know that we are in the middle of mass incarceration because the system works, not because the system's broken. Mass incarceration was put into place to do precisely what it is doing. So what we have to do is figure out a way, really, to turn that tide and stop it. But I think, meanwhile, the opportunities that you've provided are absolutely extraordinary, and I honor it completely. We are going to, on the 27th of September. See the documentary Mothers of Bedford in discussion with the filmmaker Jennifer McShane and Bobby Blanchard, who's the former director of the Children's Center at Bedford Hills. So please join us for that program. It'll be during the day from 2 to 4. Again, this will be up online if you would like your friends, and I'm sure you probably would, colleagues, to see this incredible program. And I thank you all very much for being here. Good night.